Hi, and welcome back from the Fantasy Football Prophet. So this is a little bit different video if you guys hadn't noticed today. We're getting closer to the NFL. I swear it came outside today and we were saying it was feeling a little bit colder, starting to feel that fall football weather. We're getting excited. But you know what? As we get closer to the season, things start to happen a lot faster. And so we're going to start making some videos just to update you guys on what's happening and kind of let you know, here's what you should be thinking. Some of these events come by and they flow through and one happens after another, and it's hard to keep track of all of them and what to think of all of them and what it means for your fantasy team. And there's basically three things we're going to be talking about right now. So the first is Ezekiel Elliott's 6-game suspension. And then the next two are trades involving the Buffalo Bills, where they traded away Sammy Watkins and for Jordan Matthews. So, Rob, what do you have to say, however you want to start, I guess?
Well, we'll probably give you a little bit more detailed breakdown of those trades just in a second, who went to where.
Yeah.
There's more things involved as far as draft picks and other players, but it is exciting, like you said. We get the window open here. You can feel the cool air coming in. There's preseason games last night. You can hear the football chatters on the increase. And today's moves, they're very significant. This is big news, not only in terms of fantasy football, but regular football. And so we'll talk about the trades themselves, which have a huge impact on the football season. But more importantly, we're going to talk about what impact that has for the fantasy football season, how you should look at these players, how does it affect their value, so on and so forth. But before we get into the fantasy specifically, let's just give you some details on the exact trades if you didn't hear about it. Christian?
Okay, so the first trade that happened was Buffalo traded with the Rams. And they traded Sammy Watkins and a 2018 6th-round pick for cornerback E.J. Gaines and a 2018 2nd-round pick. So that was big news right there. Now, E.J. Gaines doesn't have, and the draft picks don't have too huge of fantasy value as far as we're looking at it right now. The big thing in that trade is Sammy Watkins going to the Rams. Rob, what do you think he could do there?
Okay, so we're going to look at Sammy Watkins. So how does that affect? Well, when I look at Watkins, he's a guy that I think has had a lot of talent. A lot of people really felt like this is a guy that could become a top 10 wide receiver. In the first year, in the 16 games he played, he put up 982 yards at 6 TDs. He followed that up his second year. He only played 13 games, but he had over 1,000 yards and 9 TDs. So everybody felt like he's in for a breakout year last year. Of course, he had a foot injury that lingered all year, and he really had a down year. A lot of people felt like this guy's got all the skills to be the guy. So how does this trade specifically affect his value? Well, for me personally, he goes for playing for Buffalo. Tyrod Taylor, I think, is a above-average quarterback. I don't think he's a great quarterback, and he goes to a young quarterback, Jeff Goff, who is really still learning the game. He had some struggles last year. It might decrease Watkins' value, but I think very slightly. See, for me, it all comes down to Watkins. Has nothing to do necessarily where he's at, but ultimately, can he stay healthy?
Yeah, that's the big issue with him. That's the big question we always have to ask. But I think, that's the thing, and I just wanted to chime in and say this. As far as quarterback goes, Tyrod Taylor maybe isn't a great quarterback, but he's definitely far better than Jared Goff. And so you said that that's going to only slightly lower his numbers, but I think that could mean big things for him, especially for a guy who might not be consistent throughout the whole year due to injuries. But sorry, I'll let you finish up what you have to say there.
No, I mean, like I said, you might see a slight fluctuation in Watkins' value. But to me, I think in terms of fantasy football, the greatest impact as far as him going to LA is that's got to help Jeff Goff a lot. Right now, they had Austin, but they really didn't have a number one wideout there, and so this gives him a legitimate wideout, gives more weapons for that young quarterback, and so I think that increases his value as a quarterback. Now, with that said, I still wouldn't look at Goff as a serious quarterback that I would look at drafting this year. At least not certainly I'd watch his progress. So I think the trade there helps him at quarterback. To me, though, if there's a guy that's going to be impacted positively by this trade, it's going to be Todd Gurley. Okay, now last year teams stacked the box to shut down Todd Gurley. They didn't really have anything there. Now that's still going to come down to quarterback play ultimately, but I know having Sammy Watkins lined up out there, defenses will have to consider him a little bit, and it might begin to open up some running lanes for Todd Gurley. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I don't think that that's going to be the most prolific offense, but anything that they can do in that passing game is really going to hugely increase Todd Gurley's value. So I'm excited to see what that can do for him. He's a guy I wouldn't completely jump ship on. He's not the safest of running backs, but I think it gives him some increased value. I think it decreases Sammy Watkins' fantasy value as his stats, I believe, are going to go down, but I think it's going to help open up the field and really help that offense. Why don't we move on to the second trade? So the second trade was the Bills again traded with the Philadelphia Eagles. They gave up cornerback Ronald Darby, and they got wide receiver Jordan Matthews in the 2018 third-round pick. Now that's very interesting because before that happened, it looked like, wow, okay, the Bills are just kind of scratching the season and they're just giving up and they just are starting to rebuild and they don't think that they have the weapons. But then you go out and get Jordan Matthews, and I think it says that they're not done this year. They want to reload. They want to refire. And I think it says they don't have much faith in Sammy Watkins personally. And I think it says also a lot about Jordan Matthews. I don't know what you have to say about that, but it's huge.
No, I agree. I think at first, okay, they traded away Watkins. You think, right, maybe they're just rebuilding. They're looking to get some draft picks. But when they get rid of Watkins and they bring Matthews in, to me that's a red flag in terms of Watkins, whether or not he's not healthy or whether there's character issues. I don't know. But to me, when they brought Matthews in, that said an awful lot about them getting rid of Watkins. So Matthews coming in, what do you feel like? How's that going to affect the overall fantasy world?
Well, first of all, that adds an additional wide receiver that has some value because before he was basically the fourth string receiver when you consider that the Philadelphia Eagles, they had Jeffrey, Torrey Smith, and Zach Ertz. That basically put him fourth on the depth chart there. But now he comes to the Bills, Jordan Matthews doesn't, and I think he's going to be the number one receiver there unless Zay Jones come out and surprises us. But as of right now, I mean, that's a very safe prediction. And I think he becomes a viable fantasy option. I think he becomes a very good talent. So now, we have to look at exactly where do you want to take Jordan Matthews, but you definitely want to take him. Especially like we talked about, Tyrod Taylor, he throws the ball a lot. He's a good quarterback. He opens up the field with his legs. They got a good running game. I think there's a lot of room for a receiver to come in there easily and be a 1,000-yard guy. So, I think he's definitely a great option. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think this, in terms of how does it affect Buffalo, I think it's kind of a wash. Whether you have Watkins or Matthews, I don't think it's going to affect Tyrod Taylor that much. But I think it's a huge boost for Jordan Matthews. Now, I see Matthews when he was playing for Philadelphia is kind of locked in as the number 2 guy behind Alshon Jeffrey. But he goes from being the number 2 guy to being the number 1 option for Buffalo. And so to me, that's a huge bump as far as where he's at. And actually, Matthews, he really showed some promise his first 2 years. His rookie year, he had 872 yards, 8 TDs. And that was with Foles at quarterback, not a great quarterback. Yeah. Second year, he had 997 yards, 8 TDs. And that was with Bradford there. And then last year, he took a step backwards. He only played 14 games, had 800 yards, and only 3 TDs. But once again, I wonder how much of that was Carson Wentz. Well, now he's going to a quarterback that I think is more proven, more reliable, who's a little more talented, at least at this point of his career. And then he's no longer the number 2 guy. He'll be the number 1 guy there. He's no longer behind Jeffrey. And so to me, that's a huge bump in Matthews where he's at. The other effect that I see is Torrey Smith, like you had mentioned. Torrey Smith was what I believe the number 3 guy in that team. Now he goes to being the number 2 guy. And Torrey Smith was a player that was considered a few years ago a quality fantasy option. And now last year in San Francisco, he really struggled. He kind of disappeared, got traded to Philadelphia, looked like the number 3 guy on the team. I didn't see a lot of value, but now he's a guy I'm going to take a look at and just see how he does, where he's at. Is he a viable option? So there's what I see the impact in those right there.
Yeah, no. So I don't know. I feel like we've covered that. I think, we got to, I don't know. I'm excited to move on and talk about Ezekiel Elliott, unless you have anything more to say. This is some big news, huge. I think this changes even more than the trades did. This is just ginormous.
Yeah, Ezekiel Elliott, 6-game suspension. Now, we had talked about him a few weeks ago on our Facebook site, Fantasy Football Profits, and kind of one of the things we're beginning to pose is there was other things coming in, not just his domestic violence charges, some of those things that we know in his past. We heard he had a reckless driving charge. Also, he got involved in a fight at a bar. Just continued kind of character issues, conduct issues off the field that was becoming more and more of a red flag. And so we kind of posed the idea, one, is he going to be suspended? If he is, how does it affect his value? What about in dynasty leagues? Well, it came true today as he was suspended for 6 games by the NFL. Now, before we get into the breakdown, I guess, a lot of people think he's going to try to fight that in court. I guess you did some research on that. What did you find in terms of his ability to kind of
Yeah, so that's interesting. One thing to note is that we always post to our Facebook a couple hours before we post our videos. So if you want to get this information just even a little bit faster, you can go to our Facebook. But anyways, I posted on Facebook today, and somebody was commenting. We were talking about it, and he said that he thinks that he's going to be able to appeal and get that down from 6 games. And He even said maybe there's a chance that he completely gets rid of his suspension, but maybe just it's a couple games. But I don't think he's going to be able to get it down at all. I think 6 games is pretty set. So I looked into the rules, and basically here's what has to happen. Ezekiel Elliott has 3 days to appeal his suspension, and then the NFL has 10 days to review it. That's only 13 days for the NFL to change their mind on a player who has shown a pattern of inappropriate behavior and disrespect. For them, it's not just about punishing a guy, it's about their image. I don't think they're going to budge on this at all. I think this is something that they're going to stay very firm on. So this is something that I don't think that we should expect to change. I think we need to now just adjust our drafts and figure out kind of where he's going to be ranked. So, Rob, how does that change your value?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think there's a lot of things I want to look at as far as value. We'll look at short-term, long-term value change. But I think you're right. I don't think the suspension is going to get dropped or lowered. It may, but I don't think so. The NFL is taking a hardline stance on this. After Ray Rice, things are happening in the public. You look at Adrian Peterson and the Giants kicker last year. Those have been really a black eye in the NFL. And so I don't see them budging right now. I think they're really trying to repair their image. And this is one of the ways they're doing it. And then the other thing is we found Brady tried to fight, really took it to court, looked like he won. But ultimately, when it was all said and done, Brady had to do his suspension. He had to do 4 games. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen.
And the thing that helped Brady, and when you look at that, he went to appeal the suspension. How long did it take him to win that appeal, even for a short term? He spent months, and all he did was delay it. And Ezekiel only has 3 days really to write it and then turn it in. So I don't think it's going to change anything.
No, it doesn't. I think that he's going to face it. So let's look at Ezekiel Elliott. First of all, let's look at the direct effect this suspension has on him. Obviously, he's going to be out. And I'm going to talk about like the effect it has in terms of standard league and then dynasty leagues, because those are kind of the 2 ways you have to look at them. And so in standard leagues, here's what I think is going to happen. You can't ignore 6 games. That's huge at this point. Now, that's almost halfway through your fantasy season. Most people play in a 13-game fantasy season. And so can you really afford your first-round pick or your first-round running back or your number 1 guy to be out that long? You can't. So you got to bump him down. But I think he's far too talented, and he's got far too big of a name for people to ignore him. So I think what's going to happen is most drafts, he's going to drop down. But I don't see him going beyond the 2nd or 3rd round. I think most people are still going to take him. They want to take that chance, stash him on their bench, and what they're probably going to do is handcuff him to another running back. And so I see the drop in his value, and I'm going to adjust my rankings tonight. If you go on our website, you can see all of our adjustments, all the players we have talked about, how they kind of shake out after all these things and where we have them at. And so I got to drop him down, but I'm not going to drop him down too far. He's still going to be in my top 20. He's just far too talented to let him drop any further than that. Now, as far as handcuffs go, I talked about if you draft this guy, you got to handcuff him to either 1 or 2 players. That would be McFadden or Morris.
Yeah.
And so here's where my take is on that. And Christian, you can tell me in a second where you're at. But I really see McFadden as a 3rd down back, a change of pace runner. And I see those carries mostly going into Alfred Morris. You know, Alfred Morris is a physical back. He's a one-cut back. He fits their style very well. And in that offensive line, I think he's going to thrive for those first 6 games. So if I had a choice, that's who I'd handcuff him with, would be Alfred Morris. Once again, he's a guy that I think you need to seriously look at this point because having a quality running back for 6 games is a huge boost. But that Dallas offensive line, whoever gets the ball, whoever that turns out to be, they're going to be huge. And so I'm going to look at Alfred Morris. What it reminds me of is I have Bell in a couple of my leagues, running back Bell I have for Pittsburgh, and he was suspended last year. And so what I did is I handcuffed him with D'Angelo Williams, and that was a huge boost for me. And so you look at a guy like Alfred Williams, if he can help you for the first 5 or 6 games, if you can start your league 4-2 or 5-1, that's a huge boost. So once again, that's who I'd handcuff him with. What are your thoughts on the handcuff?
I think the handcuff is exactly right. In fact, I only bumped him down to about 8th or 9th ranked running back, and I'll tell you why. So if he misses those games, he'll play for about 62.5% of the season. So compared to the numbers he did last year, basically if he plays at the same level he did last year, which I expect, I don't see any major increases or drop-offs, then he'll basically get about 10 touchdowns, 1,019 yards, and 20 catches. Now those are pretty good numbers for those games, but I think you can even gain more of those back through those handcuffs. Especially, I've noticed in a lot of drafts, people don't want to draft a handcuff unless they have the starter. You don't just draft a backup from some random team a lot of times. And so, but if you go out, you get that guy, you can get Alfred Morris, who I think is the guy for those games. He can get you some stats, and I think he can get you to a good record and be very manageable running back. And then you get Elliott come in, who's just star power. But that being said, you got to drop him down. You do. I mean, 6 games is a lot to miss in a 13-game fantasy season. Like you said, that's basically half of the season. So that's something that you really got to lower him down. That being said, there's not much running back talent out there. He's so talented, I just couldn't drop him that far down. So I'm going to say, if you're going to draft him, you absolutely have to. You just have to handcuff Alfred Morris with him. You might as well not draft him if you're not going to, unless it's in a keeper league or a dynasty league, so to speak. But if you can get the handcuff, I think he's still a fairly valuable pick. Maybe if you had one of the last picks if you were like in a 12-team league and you had the last pick and he was out there, that would be a great draft pick. But that's I guess that's what I was saying. Don't take him unless you can get the handcuff.
Yeah, so as Chris kind of broke down in standard redraft leagues where he's at. Now I want to look at dynasty leagues. Now a couple weeks ago we did a video talking about player trends, and I had Ezekiel Elliott trending down. And for me, I've got a lot of serious concerns for him. Obviously, his talent is undeniable. But there's been so many players in the NFL, because of character issues, have destroyed their careers, okay? Time after time. And I think about a guy, to me, that stands out is Josh Gordon. This guy, in 14 games, had 1,600 yards. Talent-wise, he may be more talented than any of the wide receivers we have in the league right now, but the guy just can't keep his life clean. He can't stay out of trouble. And so the idea that somehow he's going to be able to continue to dodge these issues, I don't know. I think they would catch up to him. I think there's some real concerns here. So a couple weeks ago in the trending down, I mentioned that if I was in a dynasty league, I would have probably looking at maybe trading this guy. Yeah. Now it's too late. His value is dropping now. It'd be great to dump him while his value is still high. Long term, he's not a guy that I'd be comfortable rolling with. Once again, if I was in a dynasty league, I'd probably pack him together. I'd trade him, which that could come back to burn me. But I've just seen too many players in the NFL like him, where after a while, 2, 3, 4 seasons, they burn out of the league, they get in trouble, they get suspended, team is frustrated. And that's a trajectory he's looked like he's heading for right now. And here's the other thing. Ezekiel Elliott, from what I've seen, hasn't shown a lot of remorse. He hasn't put a lot of effort in trying to change. In fact, like I mentioned in the previous video, coaches and like the management and the owners are always going to talk about player conduct, but rarely do you hear his peers or teammates speak to that. They typically try to stay out of those issues, but yet even his teammates have begun to speak into his life concerning those issues. And to me, that's another red flag that this is a guy that's got a lot of serious conduct issues. So once again, he drops for me a little bit in standard leagues, but in dynasty leagues, I really see his value dropping. Once again, I'm not going to draft this guy with the idea of keeping him for years. I'd rather trade him off, find another young player. And right now, I think there's still enough hype out there that you could parlay some of that for another player.
So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, the advice we got for you. Be very careful with Ezekiel Elliott. He could turn out very good or very bad for you. What were you going to say?
One more thing before we go here, because I do want to talk about how do you feel like Ezekiel Elliott being suspended affects Dak Prescott or Des Bryant? Is there any fluctuation there with those guys?
That's a great question, and I don't feel like it affects them too much, actually. I feel like they're going to stay pretty stable. Like you said, whatever backup running back comes in is going to be able to put up good numbers. He's going to be able to carry them just enough, as much as they need it to. I'm not sure that it really affects anything at all, especially because that suspension's in the first 6 games of the season. You're not going to see Dallas throw the ball a ton or try to do anything fancy. They're going to play football the way they played football last year. They're going to try to bring in, their Zeke number 2, their backup Morris, and they're just going to play football. I don't think that you're going to see them try to overcompensate with that. So I actually don't expect much of a change. What about you?
Yeah, I don't see a huge change. I see a slight fluctuation, but I see it positively. I would think that Des Bryant will see a few more targets. I think that Dak Prescott will have to throw the ball a little bit more, maybe use his feet. In fact, I don't think it's going to affect Dak in the passing game that much, but what you might see is an increase in his rushing touchdowns, some of those goal line carries. So I think it will affect him. I don't think it's going to affect Dak or Des significantly. If it does, I think it'll be a positive boost to their numbers. So once again, that's the news today. This is what's happening. I'm excited.
You know what? I'm excited. We're going to keep coming out with these videos, and we're going to keep posting to Facebook. So go check out our Facebook site at Fantasy Football Profits if you want these updates even just a couple of hours earlier. But, like we were talking about earlier, it's football season. Let's get ready. It's time to get serious about winning your league. So if you're serious about winning your league, check out our website at www.fantasyfootballprofits.com. As always, we thank you guys so much for coming here.
Yeah, and one thing you can do us a favor for, subscribe and give us comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Even if you disagree, please put it in there. Once again, thanks for joining us at the Fantasy Football Profits.